we'll get started at 1, no matter what. And it looks like everybody has muted themselves, or if you haven't, just do that. I can do it also, just so that if you mute yourself, then we don't lose this screen. So I'm going to start exactly at 1, whether everybody's here or not. Okay, it's 1. I love the way everybody has the same number now. So today I've done this before. These are pretty much quick poses, and you should have all gotten a whole bunch of photos. I'm not obviously going to do all of them, although I'm going to do in Pastel next week, so some of them may be repeats as well. But what I really want to talk about is doing these quick poses. I do it, this paper is the Art Again. It's kind of a nice tone to it. It's very, very smooth. It's paper, so I can kind of work quickly on them with the paint. Because you don't want to be that invested in the outcome. It's to practice, it's to do the important things, to work with understanding good color tones quickly, understanding movement. So we're just going to start. I always start with the head when I do. I like everything to play off of that. And I'm just using that transparent red oxide right now. And the first thing I like to do is, I like to figure out what the whole movement is. And I've chosen a few that do have some good movement to them. And it's almost like as if it were going through the spine and to the high hip in this case, and down to the foot. And that foot, you'll see, lines up pretty much with where the head is going to be, the heel does. And that gives you the balance. If I were to bring this too far back on the foot or too far forward on the leg or on the back of the leg, then she would fall. But because the movement comes to the high hip and then back, then that's where we have the other foot. And often I'll measure to see, this was taken a little bit from above, so that foot is a little bit forward, but it doesn't really have to be. Line that one up, and we kind of have sort of a grid or the directions that we can use to create the movement of the figure. Now, if I look at the shoulders, they're relatively high. Her head is tucked down, and her neck is back here. And then sometimes, in this case, the shoulders are just ever so slightly, almost not at all on an angle. But I like to think of them as drawing through. Not here's the shoulder, then here's the shoulder, and maybe they'll line up, maybe they won't. Think of it as one movement that comes through from the top, from one shoulder to the other. And then I figure out where the elbows are in relation to where the waist is. And if you were to measure, I don't do a lot of this kind of measuring. I sort of let it flow. And if it's a little too big or a little, it's better to err on the side of too tall rather than too short. I figure where the waist is, and I see that elbow comes out further than the hip. So I want to find where that elbow is, and then I can create that smooth line of what the direction of the arm is going to be. The elbows kind of line up, so this one is pretty far out to about here, if you were to sort of grid it, so that's going to come out. And you can see how by doing this, you start to create what that whole movement is, rather than going, this is the head, this is, you want to keep the movement, just like in the landscapes or anything else, working that whole all the time. And now I'm going to just start to use that grid that I've created to fill out my figure. And I'm going to do this in one color first. Now, sometimes, obviously not when I'm talking, you can do these quite quickly, sometimes 5-10 minutes. And that's an advantage, again, because every time you work quickly like that, you make decisions that are a little more automatic. They may not always be that thought out, but sometimes that's a good thing because you work more from the instinct and you learn something from it. That doesn't mean everything should be done always super quickly. But I think it's nice, you make decisions, you learn things, and then when you have more time, you have the time to really create them as you want them. So this comes out, we have some nice shadows. I always like shadows. I think the shadow shapes help define the figure really well. But I'm not that worried about creating them perfectly in this first stage because I'm going to be able to put them down with some paint as well. And I'm probably going to only work part of it. To work the whole thing in color completely, two things. One is I would need more time on each piece, which I don't want to. I want to do several of these. But the other thing is everything might look the same. I like to have the feeling of you see some things more defined than others. And now I see that although her legs are in the right position, they were not quite long enough. And you don't do, you put the legs, the direction at least of that leg down before you put the clothing on. The clothing, in a sense, gets wrapped on top of. So if this is the foot here, and this is going to be the other one over here. Let's get a little more paint on there. Then we can say, all right, now that those shorts come out a bit. They're in shadow. And it wraps around. Now I'm going to leave this for now and go to a much bigger brush and start to put some color in. So you kind of eventually, you'll figure out what you like for skin tones. I tend to do a combination of a little of that coral and a little bit of the jaune brillant, maybe a touch. I kind of create a little bit of the cadmium orange and some of the yellow ochre to make it not quite so so bright. Maybe even a teeny bit now, but a little goes a long way, of the rose madder, just to make it a little bit different there. Can put some water. By the way, I'm really using less than, I think I don't know how many of you were on last week, but I was using some of the, that medium, but I find that my paintings are very sticky and they don't ever really lose the stickiness. I'm not too happy with that. So I've stopped using too much of it. Getting a little bit of a shadow color here. A little more cool. And a teeny bit more of the rose madder. And if it's too purple, I add a little bit of the coral because that has the yellow in it that makes it not quite so. This is moving around a bit. Not such. Now I'm working quickly. I'm not worrying about every shape being perfect. And if I were taking more time with it, it's still not a bad thing to create those first shapes not so exact. You know, let them kind of come together as you add color and as you add your other shapes, because in that way I think they have more movement to them. They don't feel like as colored in. Sometimes when you take too much care too early on, they just look colored in rather than with more movement to them, more spontaneous looking, which I like in a figure because we are usually in movement. I mean, the fact that we'll draw or paint people who are standing still is kind of not the way life really is. Now this is a pretty dark shape. I'm going to make it even a little darker down at the bottom. Squinting down a bit. And that that value, which right now is a cool value, I'm going to let the top light be somewhat of an intense blue. It's just the lavender, but you don't want it to be just white combined with what you've already put down, because that makes it sort of boring. It's a good place to use, an intense color. And then I'm working out of that same puddle of paint where I put that cool, but now I'm going to add to that a little bit of the cadmium orange, a little bit of the coral. I want a dark, but I don't want it to be such a cool dark, because this is actually her skin tone. So I'm warming it up, but letting it be almost the same value. I have to make sure the next paper is not moving around so much. Okay, I'm gonna wash my brush and get a little bit of the light on these shorts. And next one I'll tape down a little better. And to that was just basically yellow ochre and white. And now I'm adding a little bit of the lavender to it for the dark side, because again, it might be darker, but it still has to relate to, okay, that's too light. It still has to relate to the color, to the value and the color. There, this will be better. This is probably, there we go. A little green, but that's okay. And I'm just gonna have a teeny bit more of the leg coming. And then I'm gonna be done with this particular one and start another, because these, I'm trying to keep these between 5 and 10. And if I complete it too much, yeah, see, I don't like that division right there. It's a little too, let's get it a little darker so it kind of folds almost right in. That's too light. I'm going to soften it just a bit. Now, the reason it's too light is because our biggest light is going to be up there. We're just hinting at what goes on down here because we don't see everything the same. Put a little hat in. And that's going to be the first one. Okay, I'm going to tape that bottom for the next one. Did I find my tape? Here. Because it was moving around a lot. So that's the equivalent of maybe a 5, maybe a little bit longer because I was talking, pose. And it's really, really, the reason that you do quicker poses, I learned so much from quicker poses that I won't learn if I just work with the longer poses. I find that when I work with just longer poses, I'm obsessing about things that in the end might not be that important. You know, making those quick decisions. I remember when I was a student at the academy in figure drawing, and it was always figures with clothing on because we were training to be illustrators, and everybody seemed to see shadow shapes but me. I never could quite see those shadow shapes. And one day we had a very, a model, he was in Arab, you know, clothing, and he was charging forward with a sword or whatever. And I did it really quickly. And I threw in this shadow shape without even thinking about it on the clothing. And it was a revelation. And for me, that was the moment when I first understood that shadows should have shapes. They don't just fade this way or that way. They really have an actual shape to them. And that shape is helping to define the structure of the figure underneath. I need to put a little more paint out here. All right, let's try another one. We'll try and keep this one pretty quick also. Now, again, I like to get that head shape down. I want to know that that's happening first, because everything is going to come from that. Now, once I know that, and in this case, it's a hat, and the sides of the hat have to line up with wherever her head is, because that's how they sit on the head. In this case, we go right to the hair. That's okay. And now from here, the first thing I want to do again is get into the what is the body doing? And this one's a little more difficult. So if I'm not sure which hip is high, because it's a little confusing here on which hip is higher, but I know that that leg is bent and that leg is straight. And if you standing yourself and you take a pose, you'll notice that if whatever the weight is, if you have that leg straight, that means most of your weight is on that leg. And when that happens, your hip gets higher. So even if this doesn't look like it, I know, and of course it's a photograph, so usually I do these from life and you can walk around the figure if you're not sure. But in this case, we have to say, well, I know that that leg that's straight has to have a higher hip because that's where the weight is. And again, I just make sure it lines up. Over time, you just kind of know those things and they'll probably line up without. But if you're ever unsure, get your plumb lines going. Okay. And now our shoulders. Now, they're almost exactly even. So the shoulders are not, they're not on an angle at all. But again, I want to draw through. And again, it's like your grid. You don't start here and slowly. So I start and I say, well, what's the whole movement? And how does everything come onto that movement? How does that happen? Now, see, I have to move this over. It's not ever an exact science, thank goodness. I'm very bad at science. It's a little bit of a figuring things out. And making the adjustments you need to make as you're doing it. I haven't stood back that much, but that's okay. And then that ends up obviously being longer too. As much movement as I'd like, but we're going to go right to the paint anyway. Okay, so now I'm going to start with the hat. And I can take a little bit of time now because, in essence, it's just like when I do a landscape or whatever, you know, you have the hole down, so you can take a little bit of time knowing that even if I didn't get much further along on this stage, the hat won't be floating in space. It will be supported by the figure. That to be a little darker. And I'm just looking at shapes. Okay, and I'm going to move to the next, to the hair, and I'm going to make my way down because I have my support there. And I'm working with quite a big brush, by the way, because these are pretty quick. Now again, so in the hair, I have a lot of blue and a very dark. And I have this dark puddle here. You see, right, whoop, throw my rag down. I have this dark puddle, lots of different colors in it, but it's a pretty dark puddle. And from that puddle, I want to warm it up because now I'm going to the back, and the back is also in shadow, but it's a warmer shadow. So if you squint, you almost lose the difference between the dark of the hair and the dark of the back. But in your painting, you have to change that hue. It has to be a warmer hue. I like working on this paper. It's just sometimes it gives me a hard time, but most of the time I like it because I don't know, maybe because I don't have to care that much. Although sometimes these are my favorite things I do. And okay, which the hand is. I'm going to come in with the light side. And I have these puddles now because I've been working it. So I don't necessarily have to start again with every single. Yeah, I need a little water on that. It's a little dry.
Aline, it's Deborah. What paper is that you like?
This is called Art Again, and it's a recycled paper. I don't think it's archival, but these are not meant for that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Yeah.
Sure. Can everybody still see me? I hope it's all, I think so. But. So I'm just working a lot. Can you all see me, the piece?
Yes.
Okay, great. Yeah, I'll answer questions at the end too, so don't worry if you have any. I just don't want to lose the, I don't know. I'm still trying to figure out Zoom. I'm learning more and more about it. I'm going to be doing workshops, and I was very kindly given a little instruction from Lorinda O'Connor, who's been doing her Zoom workshops and learning how to make that work for everybody. So I'm just looking at lights and darks and skin, for the skin tones. Not going to worry too much. I could make that work eventually, but I don't care about it. Now I want to go down to here, and I'm not going to worry about the stripes at this point, but I am going to let this be a little bit cooler. Even cooler than that, I think. So I've added some of the horizon blue into my yellow ochre to get it, it's greenish, but it's maybe, and now I'm going to add a little bit of the rose madder to make it, because that will neutralize it so it won't be so green, because again, from the very beginning, now it has all of the reds and the yellow and the blue of the primaries in it. And yellow, and it might be too much. Let's see. By the way, I did put these again in, they were in the freezer, and they've really kept, they're much better. I've had to put in some new ones, but a lot of it does keep. If it's in the freezer, you don't find you need to do as much, put as much paint out, because it doesn't dry out as much. Not the freezer, I just put it in the fridge. Okay, I'm gonna get a little bit of the legs going. Just do it with the line and then be done with this one. And I've got some fun ones. I think I want to do some of those musicians because they'll be a little longer, but hopefully they'll work well. We're just going to leave that for now. Okay, so those are the first two. Give me a moment to put another piece of paper down and to change my photo. Whoop. And for those of you coming along, you should have gotten a photo of a person playing the saxophone and a person playing a guitar. And those are the other two I'm going to do. I don't know that I'll get to others besides that today, but I think those are good because since there's other also instruments that'll, there's something they're holding, and especially because the saxophone is right in front. I'll show you how we going to approach that. One sec here. Someday when COVID's over, I'm going to have a living room again. Yeah. Now, if I were teaching this normally, I'd be teaching it from live models, and that would really be fun. But that's not possible right now, so we're going to do it this way. These are all, though, my photos. I think I'll do the saxophone player first. Tape. Sorry, I'll run over one. I mean, Alrighty, so I'm going to do the saxophone player. Let me straighten him out a little bit. Because I think, again, how do we approach doing the figure when all of this is something else going on? So, but it's not that much different. I'm still going to start the same way. I'm going to give myself that little grid. So, you know, even if you're doing something longer than 5 minutes or 10 minutes, you still start the same way. You still grid it out. I've got the head is at an angle. So that's always the first thing I want to know is what's the head doing? Now, in this case, we're going to include that instrument as part of what's happening. So I need to have that in there. Got our shoulders coming. Just those indication. And again, this leg is straight. The other leg is a little bit bent. So that has to mean that that hip is a little bit higher out this way. That's your best sign of that. Keeping it kind of sketchy, kind of loose so that I can make changes. Even if you look at the great drawings of Da Vinci and Michelangelo, what I love about them is the search lines. You know, that they're not all perfectly done, that they're searching, and then they indicate when they have found the line. Okay, the middle. Now I'm seeing where the two legs meet up is over here. So that means this foot is going to come out that way. And this foot's going to come out this way and be a little bit bent. And hopefully long enough. If not, I'll make it longer. Okay, so now that is a first stage. That gives me a direction to go in. And now I'm going to take my time a little bit. Start up on his, and I'm putting in the shadow and also just the axis of his face, of his eyes, because he's a little bit on an angle where the nose is. Mouth is going to be covered up a bit by the top of his saxophone. And of course, I've done portrait things, but there's the planes as well. And, you know, I'm not trying to complicate it. I just looking at the shadow shapes. Okay. Get a little more paint. I like this transparent red oxide because it's a good color and it's fairly moist. So now right here, before I get any further, I have to know where that saxophone is going to be first. I have to get that in there. Doesn't mean I have to do a stupendous job. It's just going to be done in color. You can't see it that well anyway, but I have to know that's where it's going to be. And I don't put the hand in first. I don't know where the hand's going to be until I know where the saxophone is going to be. Otherwise, I might have a hand floating somewhere. I might have something floating somewhere else. It has to land. It's like the hips. You have to know where, if the hands are on the hips, know where the hips are first. Don't draw the hands and then the hips because they may not match up. So now I know that this hand is going to be here, which means I can pull it out and know how far out that has to go, how far out his arm has to go to that elbow. Now this, I see that the end of the saxophone, you see, is, you don't see his face beyond that little end of the saxophone. It goes right into the shoulder that's been drawn through. And we know that somewhere down here is the other hand. It's not, it's taken at a concert, so obviously it's not that great, but you know, it's just a sketch. It doesn't have to be that great. Sometimes, again, gives you more sense of movement. And my legs are too short. I've made him kind of big, so they would probably go right off the page. Never try to create, you know, to squeeze them on. Don't, if it goes off, it goes off. If you try to squeeze it on, it's going to look out of proportion, and that's what you're going to notice. Okay, I'm going to leave this and go right to paint now. I'm going to go to a slightly smaller brush because it's, I want to get that sax in as well. A little too bright. So I'm adding some yellow ochre. Remember, it's not, it doesn't have to be, it's not a portrait. This is a good thing to practice for anyone wanting to do figures. It's, you really, oh, that's so blue, but that's partly the photo. I don't know that I would make it quite as blue as it is in the photo here, but I do want the shadows there. It's kind of like, for those of you who've done some of the 10 strokes, it's a similar kind of, you're making decisions, you're making them relatively quickly. All right, let's get that 4. See, now I know this has to get much more. And then I'm going to leave that for now, because if I want to do more on the face, I can, but I don't want to obsess about it. I want to get into the saxophone and what's going on there. And again, I'm doing this all just kind of like, what are the shapes? You know, that's all. Like, what's the color? What's the shape? And not worrying too much about anything else. Because believe me, I don't know really what a saxophone would do. I'm not very versed on that. And I'm looking at the shadows. and defining everything based on what I see in terms of light and shadow. I like that white shirt. Oh, I didn't realize that. I went right over his hand. That was silly. Get that hand back. That's what I like about paint. Gets the hand right back. And I'm just dealing with that on the plane changes. Just the lighter, where it's lighter, where it's darker. I'm not going to worry about every little finger, not on something like this quick. Just an indication. And let's get some, I'm going to switch to my bigger brush to get that suit coming in. And make some adjustments here. I'll probably pull in some background color to recarve a little bit in there. I am squinting, helps me to simplify. I want that to be a little bit darker in there. So I've been using the blues I'm using this right now. I just put in some ultramarine to get it a little darker in here. But I was using the Verditer or Verditer, however you pronounce it, blue, and a little bit of the lavender as well. And I am keeping this very loose, very sketchy. But I'm trying to see proportions, I'm trying to see color, I'm trying to see values, darks and lights, where it gets darker, where it gets lighter, just to see all those as you're working it. I'm just going to let those legs come down. I think we'll have time for one more. And again, just shapes, and he's a little bit constipated looking. I think we have to bring him out a bit. There's a hint of his hand, but we don't even know what it's doing, so we're just gonna put a little bit of light here. And I think I'm gonna let this be brighter to let you sort of see that. And the inside be a little warmer. One thing I did notice that I really think would be fun to do is just that. And let this be a little brighter as well. Hopefully you can see that if this were on canvas or you were wanting to make it, you know, more and more detailed, you could take it from here and continue to do that. I'm going to put a little background just because that's the other thing you can do if you find that you've overdone you haven't quite got it the shape that you want. That's the nice thing about paint. You just can come back in, or you could make that really dark either way. But you can recarve things. And like lower this a little bit. Okay. I'm going to leave him now. Step back for a moment. Yeah, I'm just going to leave him and do one more. I think we have time for this other guy. And that's kind of nice because it's more of a profile. I like doing these guys because there's so much movement. You know, if you hire a model or if you go to a good drawing group, you want as much movement as you can get in a model, and very often that's what gives you a good model. Is they are in touch with their body. Also, dancers, actors, other artists, they understand that movement is very important. It's very boring to draw a model with not much movement. Now this guy's kind of interesting. I'm sort of figuring him out. He's definitely leaning down. His head's very far down, and his ear is high, and that's important because that really shows you that the head is lowered. Again, giving myself all the indications of where things are going to go. Get a little bit of water in here. You can get this art again online, by the way, and it's cheap. And you have to be careful because some of the pads only come with the black, and you have to make sure that's not, at least I have to make sure, I don't like working on black, that's not the one that I've gotten. And then they have the packs that are multicolored, but some of them are only a 9x12, and I like the slightly longer. So you can also get them in individual sheets. I think I got them on Dick Blick. So this knee, again, he's got, now in this case, there's a slight bend to his far leg, and they're both a little bit bent. One's a little more bent. But again, first thing I want to do is, did I get the movement? Do I have that movement going? Once I feel okay with that, then I'm willing to start getting some more details going. And again, that hand has to come after we know where the guitar is. And I'm just looking at it as one big shape. I'm not worried about what every little finger does. I say, is it light and dark? That's it. It's just a light and a dark. And that elbow is going to come about here. Running out. I do want to see how high that shoulder goes because I don't quite have it high enough. Where the shoulder shows up is important because that will push his head even lower down if we get the shoulder high. And I didn't quite have it high enough. I'm making it a little bit higher up here. I'll do that with paint as well. For me, having those search lines really makes me feel like this guy is more in movement. If I had, I'm actually have had trouble doing just a figure on a canvas. You know, I don't know if it's why that is, but I do. Now my guitar is a little off here because it's actually coming in this way. So I've got to let this come out this way a little bit. And again, I can do that all with paint. And I'm going to leave. I'm leaving this because there's not that much time. I have 15 minutes. I'll get to it if I can. And now, again, for some color. I like how dark that hat is. And this is, again, where the light part of it, you can all still see this pretty well, right? Yeah. Where the light part goes, you don't add white to your blue. You do it with a more of an intense color. Some people like to pre-mix their colors so that they're not messing, especially for these quicker poses. I find that that's essentially what ends up eventually happening anyway, because I end up with these puddles from all the previous ones. Let's get a nice bit of dark in that. Whoop. Again, I'm just looking at shapes and following them. And I think I have to change the color of his shirt because it's going to be too close to the color I've been using on his skin tone. Get that ear in there, because that is important. And I'm going to let a little more white in his hair. There we go. Okay. And so I think I'm going to make the shirt like a cooler color. Let's try something very bright. See how it looks. Who knows? I'm putting a little of the horizon blue. But I'm still looking at the way, get that a little higher, where the dark and the light of it would be to give it that feeling of the folds. Folds are another great example of, if you intellectually try to figure them out, for me anyway, that can be much more difficult than just looking at the values and the darks and lights of them. I find that is easier for me than trying to discuss the anatomy of a fold. That's a whole other lesson anyway. And I'm not even using that much water. I'm mostly wiping my brush in between changes. Again, I'm just following lights and darks, squinting down, because if I try to figure out exactly, I don't have a good enough photo really to figure out exactly what's happening anyway. If I look at the lights and darks, I think I'll get to a hint of it. right, and let's get that guitar. Putting a little bit of white and yellow ochre, and I'm going to follow. See, this is where that guitar fret is. So I don't want to draw that yet, but I want to make sure that I follow it out to where it's going to be, because I had it too far. I mean, it looks like it should be really close to him. I don't know. I have to make sure it doesn't, that it lines up. So it has to be kind of dark here. Well, it's got to relate color-wise a little more. And I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, well, if the hand, if the dark of the hand is a little bit darker, I think it will work better to separate where the fret is and where the hand is. Yeah, a little better. Now I'm going to leave that because I can carve around as well. This was closer in the photo. It didn't really work for me doing it that close here. So I'm just going to work with what I have. I like that purple, so let's do a little redder. And a little darker for the dark part. And I can use that dark to sort of create a better design on that sleeve. Again, looking at shapes. Put a little green in there just for. Now I notice, you see, this is in the wrong place now, where his legs go. So I have to readjust them. They have to be back here. But because I haven't overly committed down here, it's not that hard to do that. A little tar action here. Again, I'm changing colors. You know, the blue light is really not necessarily what's real. It's more because of you're on the stage like that. Now, whoops, my towel. I'm taking more time. This is the last one, so I'm taking a little more time with it. So I'm able to put in a few details that maybe I didn't get a chance to really do on some of the others. But the important thing is it all began the same exact way. So this just shows you how you can start to make those changes. See, this is wrong. We're not following that line anymore. This is now the lines of where the leg goes. And even if I had all the time in the world, I don't like to complete everything to the same level. I like some things to be more done, some things to be less done. I think it's so much more interesting that way. And it's how we see. I think I've probably said this and you're all probably sick of hearing it, but if you were to look at somebody standing in front of you and look them in the eyes, you can't tell really what's on their feet. You might be able to see it's a shoe, but you probably couldn't tell them much more than that because that's how we see. So for me to do everything to the same extent will take some of the movement out. I do want to put a little bit of a color behind him back in here, but I think maybe dark. Let's see what happens. Okay, I'll risk it. Because this can then be carved back a little bit. And I can lose things to the dark a little, which I like. And then let it kind of come more into the light again. A little of that also with a smaller brush. Add some fun stuff on here that's going to make the guitar pop a little more up there. Notice how you can, if you do it this way, you really can slow down now and say, okay, I'm going to take a little more time with this. I'm going to try to make it look a little bit, I'm adding the, some details that will hopefully help it to say what I want it to say. But again, everything in its time. This is now something I have time to do. And that brightness that's in there. And I'm changing, I noticed how it's a little bit warmer back here. So I started with the lilac and a little bit of the rose madder, no white, and because I wanted the intensity of it, but I like the way the back warms up due to the light. And that I did by adding a little bit of coral to that purple so that the back would be a little warmer, a little cooler in the front. And now just going to add a few little details, but not much, because add a little bit of color down here. But again, not much, maybe even less than I've been doing. I think that's going to be, I'm not going to do any more on that one. Okay, I'm going to bring you over and see if you have any questions. I'll be sending you these photos. Okay. If you have any questions, you can raise your hand. I have some that are unmuted. I didn't know if that's because you want to ask a question or no questions at all.
Yes.
Oh, good.
Yes.
Who?
Hi, I'm Charlene. I'm
Hi,
a
Shirley.
longtime follower of your blog, and
Thanks.
I was able to see your first video through Hanover
Mhm.
yesterday,
Oh.
and I've been in other online classes, so I haven't been able to make it. Seems like they always conflicted with yours.
Yeah,
I
all
made the choice. Yeah, they're everywhere, but you're fantastic. I have some questions about one. You mentioned a workshop, and it's going to be on Zoom. Would it be on Hanover or something else?
So the first workshop I'm going to do is 3 consecutive Mondays. Those are going to be priority to my Monday oil group because, but I can only take 10 people, and if they don't sign on, I'm going to open it up to everybody. I've now got my own Zoom account, and I will be doing my own workshops as well. And some of them will be through like places where I was supposed to teach, and I'm not like the Cape Cod Pastel Society and that, but I'm also going to do some of my own. And I know that Rosie, you've wanted me to do I'd love to do a figure workshop. It would all be from photos, obviously, but I'm learning a lot about Zooming, and I kept it the same this week and next week, but I'm learning that I can use my phone to do the demo part. And, you know, anyway, I'm excited, and I'm sort of testing it out on my Monday morning group because they all know me and they'll be kind. But I will definitely be doing and letting people know. And the first workshop that I'll do of my own probably will be a figure one, and it will have a lot of this kind of work, but also longer. And I have to figure out timing and how long they'll be. But one of the things they'll definitely be is much more interaction, so that when you do something, I get to see that and I can comment on it. It's not just going to be a demo. Does that help?
Second, yes, it does help. I have a couple more questions, and then I'll turn it over for everybody else. You're using, I know the paper you're using. I don't have it. Yes, I have Strathmore. It's similar to that, and I don't use water solubles. I use regular oils, which have a lot more oil because they have no filler. So did I need to put a clear gesso on it in order to keep the tone, or just use it as it is?
You can use regular oil, or you can use any kind of oil on this paper. The Canson, if it's anything that's like has a tooth, will not be as, that's the problem with it. But you can also use canvas paper, you know, like, canvas paper. And I would just put a tone on it with acrylic and work on that. The other thing you could do. Yeah, go ahead.
The palette that you're using, I'm assuming it has a lid to it. And,
yeah, it does. It's it's called a Mielo or Migello. I don't only work on that. I also have a Strata easel, and when I use the Strata easel, the palette, you know, you just use the in there.
I just thought it might be convenient to put in the icebox like you did. Yeah.
Yep, these are great.
I have a huge palette, and I have the same thing. I have an easel on a tripod that is fine, but making it capable of being saved it sounds great.
It saved it quite well when I I clean it and then I cover it. I mean, I don't clean out the paints. I just clean the middle part and I cover it and I put it in the refrigerator. And I was visiting my daughter. I haven't painted since I was away. Anyway, it was like a week in the fridge, and a lot of the paint was still fine.
That's great. Thank you for your help, and I hope to be included in your next workshops.
If I have your email, definitely just make sure.
I'll make sure I send it to you to make sure that happens. But appreciate all of it. You made some real interesting points that I hadn't picked up from others doing similar things. So thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? I would have you in gallery view, so that really helps. If you can just unmute yourself if you have a question, and if not, then I'll say have a good weekend. I don't know who will join me next week. I'm going to do this, but I'm going to do it with pastels. And that'll be my last actual just demo. From then on, I'll be doing workshops. And if you, most of you, I assume I've reached through email. If not, make sure I have it and I'll put you down so that and then I just obnoxiously send everybody what I'm doing. And if, a few people say, quit sending me anything, and that's fine too. But otherwise I'll send it to people, and you'll know when everything is going to be. Yes. Joyce, did you have a question? You have to unmute. Let me unmute you. Yeah. Wait, did I unmute you?
How's that?
That's good.
Okay.
Joyce? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
I've attended a lot of your demos through the Hanover group, and I don't know that I sent you my email otherwise, but so you'll have it through that, right?
Did you get do you hear about my emails, or do you just get it through Hanover?
I get yours too, I think, when you have post paintings and so on.
My website is my name, and you can always reach me through there.
Okay. Yeah.
So sure,
Okay,
make sure
thanks a
I
lot.
have it. That would be great.
Mhm.
Any other questions?
This was quite helpful.
Oh, well, thank you for joining me. That was really nice.
Yeah, I do have, well, I'm sorry, one more thing.
Mhm.
Will you be able to give us a little bit more description of the workshops when you're ready to go? Because I have really enjoyed this, and then at some point it gets a little frustrating, because I'd like a little back and forth.
Yes, well, no, absolutely. A workshop will be longer. It's not going to be an hour, obviously.
Okay.
It'll probably be it may be as long as 6 hours. And what I've learned about being able to put people in rooms and privately talk with you, and also, and so my idea is to create the feeling of a classroom like this. I just put everybody in gallery view now because you don't have to see my demo. I always start with a demo, then people will be doing their own work, and they can let me know if, like, is this going to be a good photo to work from or whatever. We have to do photos.
Okay.
And then I can put everybody in a room, individually, and visit you individually. The other thing that will be really helpful that I learned is when you are working on your painting and you want me to say something about it, you take a photo of it and you email it to me, and then I can actually bring it up on my shared screen and talk about it. So I'm excited about the things I'm learning to do that are much more about a workshop than just a demo. So, yeah.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah.
So, Aline, it's Deborah, and I was wondering about the medium that you use. You said it was sticky.
I'm not going to use it anymore. I was using, they're all different mediums for the water miscible oils, one made like, and they're all the same. I mean, they all felt the same to me. They're just called artist medium. And although they're really nice when you're painting, I have paintings that are sticky and they're dry. And I'm thinking, and it's like I put two paintings, one leaning against another. The paint's been fine. It hasn't peeled off or anything. But it's sticky.
The same thing. Is it old? It's not old. Do you have to shake it? No.
There's nothing to do with it. One of them was brand new and I just opened it and it was doing that. And so I've kind of decided that I don't think I'm going to use it, because I just did a painting the other day. I didn't use it at all and it wasn't sticky. And I'm thinking that's probably why. And
oh my gosh.
I'm serious. Yeah. It does some nice effects, but I'm not going to do it anymore.
It's good to know. Yeah, that's too bad.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
All right. Well, thank you.
Any
see
other
you next week?
Oh, great. Any other questions?
Aileen, hi, this is Paula. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Oh, okay. I don't know if I'm going to.
Hi, Paula.
Hi. Okay. I noticed that you were painting very thin in your demos. Do you thicken it up eventually in your painting, or do you keep it nice and thin?
Actually, fairly thick. They start thin, but I mean, even on these paper ones, like by the time I got to the paint part, they were pretty solid paint. They weren't thin. The sketching part is thin, and sometimes I try to keep my original dark, like my value study, to whatever extent I bring it, pretty thin. Because if you use paint too thick, it's going to influence the paint you put on top of it, and then it's going to dirty it. So I keep that fairly thin, either with a little thin down water or very dry brushed. But once my paintings get pretty thick as they build, even the demos get pretty thick.
Oh, okay. Great.
Any other questions?
Just a comment. I have another artist friend that has tried those mediums and had the same reaction that you did, that
Yeah.
It just never dried. It was constantly sticky. So you're making a good choice. She
Yeah.
had similar problems.
Yeah, I'm not going to use it anymore. It was kind of fun in the beginning, and I thought, oh, this is great. And then all of a sudden, I started noticing that all my paintings were sticky. I thought, I mean, they're dry, but they're sticky, so I'm not going to do it anymore. Well, if that's it, then it's been nice. Thank you for joining me, and
Thank you.
thank you. And if you want to make sure you always hear from things, just email me, and I'll put you on the list. And for those of you who want to do pastel, I'm going to be doing this pretty much the same thing. Hopefully, not the same figures in pastel next week. So, and try
I
these.
do both.
Those
That's
photos
great.
they send. So just try them. It's really fun, and you'll learn an incredible amount. Honestly, by working quickly like that, you just make decisions you might not make if you labored over them.
Do
And
you
it doesn't.
have an idea? Do you have an idea about when, like in the end of the year or soon, or when those
I'm
workshops
going to
might
start
be coming
teaching
up?
in September, my workshop. So
Okay.
I just have to figure out. I have a feeling that the first one I do for my, my own, which would be the figure one, probably will be in October, because I think I have at least 2 workshops coming up in September. So I'll figure it out, but I'll let everybody know. And I'll also post it on my website on my workshops once I figure everything out. Okay. It's like a lot to figure out, but I figure it out. Okay. Well, it's nice seeing you all. If you have any other questions, just email me. Bye. Have a good weekend.